To simulate or not to simulate? That is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the outrageous headaches caused by a full-body cloth simulation, or to bind the cloth eternally to the rigid skeleton of your character, and by doing so, to finish, to complete, to end the heartache and thousand sleepless nights spent obsessing over such a silly little movie. Tad Catalano, our cloth TD, did an amazing cloth setup for Walter. The only problem was that because of the way the suit fits, we barely noticed any of the extra movement, and it wasn't a very good payoff for all of the work he was putting in to simulate the shots. So instead, we decided to bind the cloth to the skeleton the old-fashioned way. Now, usually you do this by painting weights or using lattices, but we did it with a bunch of extra bones and nulls that gives us a little more control over how it moves. For instance, when you bend forward in a buttoned suit jacket, the lapel bows out like so. To simulate this, we put in an IK chain and parented the root to the neck and the effector to the point on the spine. Then as they move, the length of that chain stays the same and makes the jacket hang loose. This same technique also works really well on the bellies of fat characters. A similar trick is to build a series of nulls that are constrained to two ends, but however you move the ends, the nulls will stay pointed towards each other. This works wherever you've got a piece of geometry that's collapsing in on itself. Just add a couple of these and it will help keep that volume consistent. I used that same stretchy setup with a few set-driven keys so that when he raises his arm, the whole jacket reacts by moving a little to compensate. One other thing to remember about this approach is that at a certain point, you can no longer paint weights because it's just too complex. The only way to control how much effect a bone has is by moving it deeper into the mesh to tone down its influence, or just adding more nulls. I also tweaked a few things with blend shapes. When he bends his arm, this is what it looks like with just the envelope, but I also made a little blend shape and hooked it up to the elbow rotation so that we get this nice little crease as his arm bends. This no simulation approach was what we ended up using in about 90% of the shots. However, all of that work that Tad did setting up the cloth wasn't a waste. One of the things we found that worked really well was just to simulate the parts of the cloth that are easy to do. On Walter, these are the loose sections at the bottoms of his pants and the base of his jacket. So if you turn just those isolated areas into cloth clusters, you get a really nice compromise with not a whole lot of effort. The last cloth trick we did is for the end of the movie when Walter is flying through the air. We really needed the whole suit to feel like there's wind rushing past him, so Tad did a really long simulation of Walter just standing still with the strong wind blowing against him. Then we baked that simulation into an animated blend shape and tied it into the rig so that the animator can just use a slider to turn on our pre-built windy animation, but then he can still pose the character on top of it like normal. It's not technically accurate to how the cloth would move in each of those different poses, but it gets the job done, and it only took about an hour to do one simulation that we could reuse in 20 different shots. There won't be a podcast next week because I'll be in LA for SIGGRAPH, but if you happen to be going, I've put up my schedule on the blog, and I'll also be twittering throughout the week, so hopefully I'll see some of you there.